All right, welcome to the AdaptX podcast, where we have conversations with individuals building accessible businesses, advocating for inclusion, or excelling in adaptive sports. Our intention is never to speak on behalf of those with disabilities, but to create a platform to amplify their voice and share ideas for a more accessible world. Today, I'm joined by Brandon Biggs. Brandon is a CEO and co-founder of XR Navigation. He began developing their product Audiom during his master's degree and is continuing research and development as he completes his PhD in human-centered computing at Georgia Tech. Brandon, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So maybe let's start with early on, your childhood, your education. Have you always been passionate about programming and computer science, or did you develop that later in life?
Definitely developed it later in life. I was originally, I've always been interested in computers, so I had a computer when I was 3, but mostly it was for games and, doing fun things. And so I always had a positive association with computers. But it wasn't really until I started getting into assistive technology when I was about 15 or 16, when I started gaining an interest in wanting to build my own apps for different devices. So there was an old assistive technology some nerds might know about called the Icon Braille Plus Mobile Manager, and I got really excited about wanting to build apps in Python because it ran on Python. So that got me into learning how to program. My bachelor's degree was in music, because I wanted to be an opera singer when I was younger. So the transition to inclusive design and development actually happened when I was about 22 to 24-ish area. And so that's kind of, it wasn't ever really a career path that I thought I would be taking.
So you mentioned some assistive technology at 15 or 16. For those who aren't familiar, you have a visual impairment, and have you had that since birth, or was it developed later in life?
Yeah, I'm pretty much totally blind at this point. I have a form of retinitis pigmentosa. It's called Leber's congenital amaurosis, LCA, and I was legally blind when I was born, and my parents didn't know it until I was about 18 months old. I guess I'm pretty good at faking being blind when I was a kid. So anyway, yeah, they didn't realize it until I was about 18 months. But then after 18 months is when I started getting, services for orientation and mobility and VI services. So yeah, pretty much all my life I've been blind.
So even though you weren't introduced to the app development and the AT devices until 15 or 16, you've been utilizing technology since you were
100%.
a child. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. I did not have a screen reader though until I was about 12, which might sound wild to some people, but it was actually very early days of JAWS, and so I got JAWS when I was 12, and that was very transformative. I was able to go onto the internet for the first time.
Yeah.
I had done computer games, on a Mac up until that point, and Mac, unfortunately, at that stage in their life cycle was not accessible, and so we just didn't have the resources to switch over to a Windows at that point. So that was, yeah, I was kind of left out of the screen reader game until I was about 12.
How were you engaging with and consuming information then up until that point?
People reading things to me, or I had enough vision to where I could look at the screen if they were really terrible graphics that were super high contrast. And so I had enough vision to kind of make my way through some point and click, adventure games like, Pajama Sam and Putt Putt and these things. I could see enough to click around on there. But once it got to games where I actually needed to read, I couldn't play them anymore.
Gotcha. So most products that are successful are developed to meet a need of a specific population. Did you build Audiom? And of course, you can give our audience some background information on what it is, but did you build Audiom to meet a specific pain point that you were experiencing?
It's one of those things where it's a chronic pain point, and so you don't notice it until you really like it. It's just a common, an everyday experience, and so um, I've always relied on people to view maps for me. So Audiom, in brief, is the world's most inclusive digital map viewer, and you can access digital geographic maps either visually, auditorily, or textually, or any combination of those three different modalities. And it allows you to, view all the distance, direction, shape, size, orientation, and general layout of all the points, polygons, and lines on the map. So it's very detailed, and you can really get all that information. But growing up, I never looked at maps. I remember viewing one map in middle school of the United States, and that was really the first map I'd ever experienced. And it was a puzzle map from the American Printing House for the Blind, and that was really interesting for me. I spent a lot of time, feeling the different shapes of the states, and comprehending, like, this is communicating space to me. So actually looking in games often had maps as well associated with them, and I could never see those maps. They were just too complicated for my poor eyesight. And so actually being able to touch and interact with a map that way was really transformative. But I didn't really realize that I was interested in maps specifically until I got into my master's in inclusive design. I didn't know that graphics in general were extremely hard for blind people, especially representations of data. So, um, function graphs, function charts, or different types of graphs or line charts or whatnot. But maps didn't really occur to me until I was asked to create an accessible version of the Napoleon's March of 1812 from my master's advisor. And that was his first assignment for me, was create this accessible version of this infographic. And after viewing that, like, there's a map underlying all that information, and it just kind of blew my mind. Like, how do I represent this? I've never represented anything similar. So that kind of put me on the path of how do we make maps accessible. And since then, I've just every single day I encounter a new map or a new experience where I wish I had a map. So uh, for example, yesterday my wife was telling me about how her hotel is close to where she's at on an offsite with her company. And I kind of want to see where she's walking around at, and I can't do that without a map. So that's just like a one very silly circumstance. But for things like election results, live election result maps, those are inaccessible. We made the very first accessible one this November. And other types of maps, like the eclipse map or COVID statistic maps or hurricane maps, these are other types of maps. They're just completely blank to blind people in particular.
So what is it then that makes those maps inaccessible, and what do you guys do differently that changes that?
Well, yeah, most maps, when I arrow over them with my screen reader, and a screen reader, for those who don't know, reads out content using text to speech on the screen. When my screen reader goes over a map like a Google map or an Esri map, it says map region, graphic, clickable, blank. Map region, graphic, clickable, blank. That's it. Nothing else. So I get nothing. Absolutely nothing when I view a map. So what we've fully allowed people to do is access. We're very similar to like a video game where users move a character around the map, a user specified distance, and they'll hear the name and sound of objects as they move a character over them. So, for example, Fillmore Street, and the sound of a concrete footstep, to represent the street. And so using this kind of conventions allows a person to redraw a floor plan with like 85% accuracy, compared to about 90% accuracy when viewing like a visual map, for example. And you can get higher or lower results depending on how good you are at using Audiom. So I'd probably be 100% accurate, but it's a really a way to communicate all that spatial information that makes a map a map.
So explain, I guess, how it works. Are you manually changing code? Are you asking users to map out environments?
We are a map viewer, so we take whatever geographic data somebody already has and renders that. So there's this idea of this whole entire field of data visualization, and it's kind of an antiquated term. I like to call it data representation, because there's nothing that says that data is inherently visual. That's just a construct of our societal tendencies. And so this field of data visualization is one of three modalities or four modalities that we've identified that can communicate symbolic information to people. So you've got text, you've got visual, auditory, and tactile aspects, modalities that you can represent data in. And basically, nobody is looking at very few people are looking at these other modalities for representing information. It's all in data visualization. Uh, so that's kind of the fundamental premise that we um, worked from when creating Audiom. We said there's nothing that says a map is visual. Nobody sat down and said, oh, maps need to be completely visual. That's just what they, how they've been represented. Maps are actually what's called vector data, and it kind of sounds like left bracket 1 comma 1 right bracket comma left bracket 1 comma 2 right bracket comma, and will be these points that are then rendered using these shapes on the screen. So we said, let's take those numbers, vector data, and render it into a video game format. And that was kind of the fundamental aha moment for Audiom. And that's what we do. We convert a PDF map into vector data that's computer readable, and then we can render it visually, auditorily, and through text.
So how does your JAWS screen reader narrate an Audiom map?
It usually will have so attached to one of those vector pieces is always some kind of label or a name or something, and so it'll just read out the name of that feature. So it'll say something like Fillmore Street, and then it will play a sound kind of representing a street. And so we kind of do some magic to figure out how, like, is this a street? Does it say street in its name? Kind of thing, or does it have a type of street? Because usually there's some kind of properties that are associated with that data. And so that's what Audiom is, the JAWS or the screen reader is reading to the user. And so as they're moving over that object, 1 meter at a time, it'll keep saying Fillmore Street, Fillmore Street, Fillmore Street until they get off of it. And then it might say Starbucks. Oh, there's a Starbucks there. And so the real important aspect of Audiom is that you're actually moving and doing what we're called pulling the data from the map so that you can understand what you're interested in and learn information you didn't know existed on that map. It's different than, say, listening to somebody else use the map and do what's called a, push type of experience. And so there are different types of what we call sonifications or data representations. So sonification is the auditory version of data visualization, and so these are different types of representations. And so we do a pull version, very similar to a visual map is very pull.
So you're not live time navigating someone, so you wouldn't pull up Audiom on your phone and say, I need to find that Starbucks on Fillmore Street, and then it wouldn't be guiding you in any way, correct?
No, it's a map.
Yeah.
We do have some simulated experiences, and you can pull it up while you're physically there. It does connect to GPS, but the primary purpose is to do that simulated journey before you actually go. So you gain the confidence and understanding of what's around you or what's there before you actually go. And almost more importantly, you can also do data analytics to understand the distribution of, say, COVID cases in an area, or how sea level rise is happening around the globe, or how the different ice sheets are melting, or all this different data that is present on different types of maps. So that's also something you can do with Audiom.
Gotcha. Is there tech that is effectively helps you navigate those environments? So you use Audiom to pre-plan your journey and find a destination and what's around you. Is there tech on your phone that you use to guide you, or?
I'm very old school. I use just my white cane to kind of do feel what's around me. And Audiom is very helpful for disconnecting and being in the moment when you're actually physically navigating. You can use something like Google Maps, or I like for indoor navigation, Good Maps or Next. They're two turn-by-turn navigation applications that you can use that will give you sub-meter guidance while you're physically navigating indoors. But I'm very much the proponent of, let's. I don't have enough cognitive space to be using an app, using my cane, and trying to navigate and understand where I'm going, and do all three of those things at the same time when I'm navigating. So I'm very disconnected from technology when I'm actually physically navigating, even if it's a route I know very well. I don't necessarily like to, be. I don't like
Yeah.
to have headphones in or be listening to things because I use my ears while navigating.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So say my company's hosting a dozen road races, and on each road race sign up page, we have a map that just shows people where the race starts and finishes and the course, the streets around it. What would we need to do to make the presentation of that more accessible?
So nothing specifically you would need to do at this point. That would be a situation where you would send me the data file, and I would then put that into Audiom. So if you're using something like, I don't know, how do you typically create those types of maps?
We've been drawing the courses with Map My Run, which is an Under Armour product, and it's just a GPS that allows you to kind of map out different routes, and it tells you how far they are.
I wonder if Map My Run allows you to export a GeoJSON of the route in any way, shape, or form, because that would be what I would want. And then we would use whatever base layer they're using underneath that from OpenStreetMap, probably, and then we would just copy that. But I would love an introduction to Map My Run because that sounds like what a lot of places would use. And so we would our goal, our vision with Audiom is that we're building the platform, the other tools like Map My Run can use to make their technology accessible, because that's what you're already using. We don't want to compete with that. We do the rendering that Map My Run has as the actual representation you're experiencing, but we don't want to do all the marketing and recreation and experience of that run drawing experience. That's what Map My Run is doing, and so I don't want to compete with that, and so that's why we want to work with those places. But you can send us your map, and we can convert that into vector data and
Yeah,
and just give you an embed code to
yeah, that
replace Map My
yeah,
Run.
that would be cool. And the visual presentation of it on the website would be through that OpenStreetMap, or would it be an Audiom?
It would be Audiom. Audiom would
Yeah,
just be rendering the OpenStreetMap data, or whatever data you give us. We would basically take whatever data you give us and convert that into Audiom.
wonderful. And so your target customer and how you plan to reach them. I saw universities, healthcare facilities, etc. Are you actively reaching out to them and explaining to them what value you can provide? Are you hoping that they'll learn about the organization? What's kind of the
Yeah.
model there?
Absolutely. Our primary customer segment right now are actually conferences and exhibit halls and hotels. So, but yes, we are reaching out to universities and healthcare institutions. There's so many places. Everybody has a map. Everybody, like, maps run our entire, society. So there's so many places we can talk to, but we are reaching out to these places and saying, hey, your map isn't accessible. Would you like to make it accessible, basically, and reach an extra 12% of the population? And a lot of people are like yes, and a lot of people are like no. So it's kind of a matter of finding people who are open to that. So yes, we are actively reaching out. We're going to places like the Enabling Summit, the CSU and Assistive Technology Conference. We'll be at CES, the Consumer Electronics Show, this year. So we're going to all these conferences to kind of connect with people in the space to try and find clients that are open to having accessible maps.
Are there WCAG standards for maps?
There are WCAG, so the WCAG stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, and they apply to maps. And the 1.1.1, so the very first guideline from the WCAG says that every non-text content needs to have a text alternative that's a text version that serves the equivalent purpose to the non-text experience. And with maps, this has been misinterpreted a lot. So basically, what has happened in the past is they said, all right, there's no way for us to convey the spatial information, so let's just put all the other information and make that accessible. So, like the name, the statistics. So, for example, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, when they gave a COVID statistic map, just provided a table that had the county or the state on the left column, and then all the other columns were the statistics like deaths, total tests, cases, all that kind of stuff, cases per 1 million, and there were the different columns in the table, and each row was a different state or different county. So you would go through that table to answer questions about the map. But we just ran a study where we asked participants, what state bordering California has the highest number of COVID cases, and you're unable to answer that question with that table. So what Audiom did is, or what XR Navigation is doing, is redefining what equivalent purpose means. It's not give people an alternative. It's what exactly is a map, fundamentally, from like a conceptual level. And we've created this, actually, the field of cartography has created this framework called spatial knowledge, and that includes landmark, route, and survey knowledge. And basically, it's these elements of distance, direction, shape, size, orientation, and general layout of all the points, polygons, and lines on a map. And that is kind of the fundamental information that you need to convey with a map. And so we've been talking to different places to make the interpretation of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines for maps include this type of equivalent purpose test. And so does Web Content Accessibility Guidelines include any information for maps? Not explicitly, but it does, in that you need to interpret the guidelines correctly in a way that they're intended. So, what is equivalent purpose for a map, and actually having a clear answer to that. It's not just the properties associated with the features, it's everything, the spatial information and the properties.
Yeah. How long have you been working on this?
I started working on map accessibility in 2017.
Okay.
So it's been a while.
Has digital accessibility always been at the forefront, or would, like, in my view, it's become a lot more prevalent over the last year or two, but that might just be the different communities I've moved myself into over the last couple of years, and so I'm hearing kind of that echo chamber. But it's also maybe corresponding to some of the lawsuits that have come about for companies that are inaccessible digitally. Like, have you seen a shift in people prioritizing this?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And thank goodness.
Yeah.
So when it's always been top of mind for me. So it's personal. When a website's inaccessible, I can't use it. You will not get my customership. I will not patronize your site if it's not accessible. I'm sorry. And it's not anything personal. It's just I can't use it.
Yeah. I
So
think
it's and the Americans with Disabilities Act just passed their Title II regulations in April, calling on all state and local governments to make their content accessible, according to the WCAG, the WCAG.
yeah.
The European Accessibility Act is going to be coming into effect in June 2025. That focuses on the WCAG. Department of Health and Human Services just passed a rule in April, calling on all healthcare institutions to make their digital content accessible according to the WCAG. So, yes, things are happening, and laws are going into effect, and people are starting to take notice, thankfully.
Yeah, no, I obviously, as a business that prioritizes and focuses on inclusion and accessibility, it's important to me too, but it seems like it would be challenging for small local businesses to meet this quota when state and governmental organizations who have unlimited resources aren't even accessible.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the challenge that um, we're dealing with. So tools like WordPress and Wix they're working, they're the ones we really need to kind of push for the small
Right.
business accessibility. And they're the ones that they are like, there's a head of accessibility at Wix, and he's very interested in having tools and defaults that are sensible, and they have an accessibility tool that you can use to make your website more accessible. So that is there. WordPress has their accessibility tag where they've evaluated, the uh, what are they called? The themes that you can put on your WordPress site for accessibility. So you can get a theme that is has some intention around accessibility. It's not going to make your website accessible by default, but it'll help. So there are these resources that are out there for small businesses, but you're right. It's difficult. Um, Oftentimes there's really bad recommendations and advice, and the plugins. So the power of WordPress and Wix and these tools are that you have plugins, and oftentimes these plugins are inaccessible. And
Right.
it's the incompetency and lack of knowledge of these developers that are building these tools that make them inaccessible. And so that's kind of the biggest problem. They don't install the Axe plugin, the AXE plugin from DQ systems to evaluate their content for accessibility. It's free. Everybody should have it on their browser. It's a tool that gets 70% of the web, the WCAG errors that you can get on a website, and that's going to just open your eyes and mind to thinking about digital accessibility for running that plugin every time you make an update to your website.
We are grateful for the support of our first show sponsor. Resolution Fitness offers leading brand health club equipment and accessories for residential and commercial use. In addition to traditional exercise equipment, they specialize in adaptive fitness products and wheelchair accessible machines. If you're interested in outfitting your fitness facility or home gym to be more accessible, visit www.resolutionfitness.ca or the link in the show notes below. Yeah, we'll include a link to that plugin so people can add that to their browsing experience if they're building sites. I mean, I built in Squarespace originally because it was an easy drag and drop for someone who has no web developing. But we're in the process of transitioning to maybe a new website platform and a new e-learning platform. And I've gone through endless demos over the last few weeks and asking questions about the digital accessibility of each to try to figure out what the best platform to use would be. And I don't know if WordPress is the answer. I've heard mixed reviews on whether Squarespace is accessible, but like you said, it's the underlying code. Like I feel like they shouldn't be publishing themes if they're not accessible.
100% agree. And it's not the tool, it's the all the elements within that tool. So there is the A tag. I can't remember what it stands for, but that is for content development platforms like WordPress. It's like WCAG, but for these I think it's called A tag. And it's a similar set of guidelines. So that's what they should be held towards. But when you're going and talking to new systems for a business, I like to tell people to ask three questions. And if you get answers to two of them, move forward. If you only get answers to one or zero, just go on to the next one. There's so many options out there for most products. So the first question is, do you have an accessibility conformance report for your tool? The second question is, and don't accept an answer of, here's our accessibility statement. You
Yeah.
need an actual conformance report, because that's a systematic evaluation of their platform for accessibility. A statement is something you can generate in GPT, and don't even don't it's useless. It's just a lip service on a website, unless if they tell you the kind of systematic evaluations they do. So like on our website, for example, we do have an accessibility statement that links to our accessibility conformance report, but it also tells you we test on NVDA, JAWS, VoiceOver, and on these different browsers. So that is useful information. The second question is, what is the name and email of your head of digital accessibility? And you want a name and contact email for them, and not like a accessibility@x.com, because if you are trying to you have a bug and you need it fixed right away because you can't use a site, an accessibility email will often get lost in the mix, and you can't hold somebody accountable and really get in contact with the right person. So that's number two. Third is a live demo so that I can actually go in with my screen reader and test, or you can try it out yourself and evaluate it with the Axe plugin. And so I need two of those to be answered in order to move forward with any purchase.
That conformance report that you mentioned, where could businesses go to get one conducted?
They can do it themselves if they wanted. It's not really recommended because it does require some expertise.
Right.
But they can go to, I mean, just Google it. There are a dime a dozen. Small businesses can go to independent contractors that are um, on the web. So I use somebody called Nick Chan, and there are others, independent contractors you can get, and it does cost some money. But I would also, if you're like going to hire somebody, ask them for their certified web accessibility. Their web accessibility certification. So you can become a certified web accessibility specialist from the International Association of Accessibility Professionals. And those are the types of people that should be building your website. And so, for those who don't know anything, that's a really nice indicator to take a look at. Do they have this certification? Because that means they've worked in digital accessibility at least 2 years and have taken a rigorous test to pass, to understand digital accessibility. You can also go to a big company like Level Access, DQ Systems, or TPGI. Those are the big three out there. They also do this type of work. The Blind Institute of Technology is another one that I definitely want to give a shout out to. They're based out of Colorado, and they hire a lot of blind and low vision people to do the digital accessibility evaluations. So there's a bunch of different places. Just Google, web accessibility evaluation, or VPAT, VPAT, and places can do those. Do not look into what are called accessibility overlays,
And
because
that was my next prompt. So perfect
yeah,
segue. Perfect
um,
segue.
they're not good. They're kind of a band-aid solution that is questionable efficacy. So um, they'll probably get there eventually. I don't think that it's a thing that it's a tool that the site developers should be implementing. I think it's something the screen reader users should be using. So they claim in their marketing materials that they will automatically make your website accessible. That's impossible. It's not possible to automatically make a website accessible. If it was, then guess what? You would have an automatic magic website generator that you would just think, here is a website, and it's there. Accessibility is exactly the same thing. You can't tell an AI model, like, this is meant to be a picture, or this is meant to be a heading level 2. That's not something that an AI can understand from looking at that website. Even humans have a trouble understanding what's going on that website. So often, what happens when you activate an accessibility overlay is that it makes your website less accessible. And there's a bunch of research that has been done on this topic. And so the ultimate lesson of accessibility overlays is they actually make your accessibility worse. They don't make it better. So I definitely do not recommend them. Nobody in the digital accessibility space does. They have been sued repeatedly from multiple places, around the world, and have lost. So I definitely don't recommend them. They might get there eventually, and in a different form than what they're currently being marketed as. But right now, as it stands, they are not good enough to do auto magic. Now, if you do have a tool like some of the tools that are being developed by CurbCut or OS, or different places that help you as the developer make your content accessible and work alongside you and tell you, hey, this is something that's not accessible, or the Axe plugin. These are free tools that use AI to help you as the developer make your content accessible. And so those are 100% okay, because you have the ultimate say at the end of the day on is this accessible or not. It's not automagically doing changing your website to quote unquote make it accessible. Quote, it's helping you as a human make it accessible.
So you wouldn't say that widgets are better than nothing?
No,
Yeah.
widgets are worse.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think a lot of us in the small business space understand the importance, feel a sense of obligation, and we're not always sure where to turn. So it's easy when you're marketed, like you said,
It's better if
you're
you don't do
incorrectly
anything.
marketed.
It's
Yeah,
actually
that's tough.
Yeah, it's better if you don't do anything because your website is actually probably not that bad. I mean, try the Axe plugin. You
Yeah.
might be surprised. And if you don't do anything fancy, you haven't hired a developer to do, stuff on your website outside of the defaults, usually something like Wix or Squarespace is actually not bad. So, just um it's sometimes little things like maybe forgetting to add alt text to your graphics. It's not usually big things. It's usually the small things. The only big thing that a lot of websites have is their map, and that's completely blank. But that's another topic.
Yeah, so some of the lowest hanging fruit, I suppose, that someone without technical proficiency could address is alt text, contrast ratios, missing links, broken buttons, things like that.
Yeah, missing, not necessarily missing links, but like forgetting to add text into buttons or links, that's a huge, huge issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just download that Axe plugin and it'll tell you, the low hanging fruit.
Yeah.
And the color contrast is another issue. There's a bunch of there's set I want to say 56, 57 criteria or something like that
Yep.
within the WCAG guidelines, and so most of those can be caught using these plugins.
We deviated a bit from talking about Audiom, but what's the business model? How do you plan on making it sustainable and successful?
We charge an initial implementation fee followed by yearly licensing fee for Audiom. So those are very dependent on the complexity and size of the company that we're working with, or business that we're working with, or government institution that we're working with. And so our initial customer segment and focus has been conferences and exhibit halls. But we're talking to places like universities and cities and states and different types of agencies with existing digital maps to make those accessible. But if anybody listening to this has an inaccessible map, talk to me and I'll let you know. Is this something that we can actually do or not? And so yeah.
And you've received some funding through NIH grants and
Yeah.
other governmental grant sources.
Yeah, for sure. So this is a project out of the Smith Catawba Eye Research Institute, and so they've received a bunch of money from NIDLR and NIH. XR Navigation has also received money from National Institutes of Health, NIH, and we received our phase 1 from our small business grant, and then we're getting ready. We received it probably will fund score, so fingers crossed on that. For our phase 2, which is a much, much bigger, it's a $2 million grant versus a $300,000 grant.
What is your dissertation topic?
Non-visual digital maps. It's either that or inclusive digital maps. I haven't figured it out yet, but because I've done research in both, but primarily focused on the non-visual digital map experience. And so I've done things from let's do indoor maps to drawing geographic shapes and creating your own maps using a non-visual editor. So it's very much focused on that topic.
And when you complete your PhD, is your plan to work on Audiom full time or XR
Hopefully,
navigation?
unless if Google, Esri, and Microsoft, Apple, one of those companies ends up, I guess, purchasing Audiom and going with it. That would be a reason not to, I guess, go. But I'll definitely be working on it for the next few years, at least after I graduate.
Are you concerned about AI technology and kind of the competition in that space, or are you?
No. AI is so bad.
Yeah.
It can't even answer what state bordering California has the highest number of COVID cases. So it's so far away from being able to do anything in the spatial knowledge space. In fact, if you go to Gemini or Google or which is Google or GPT or Claude, in their limitation section, it says we do not do spatial reasoning. If you need to do spatial reasoning, you need to check it with a sensory interface like a map,
Gotcha.
and that's what Audiom is.
There you go. Maybe there will be some tools that will expedite your development process,
Yeah,
AI
yeah,
tools.
yeah. We do use AI in our company. So we have three different tools that we're building, or three different ways we're using AI in our company. So one is our developers supercharge themselves with Claude and AI and GPT and different tools to help expedite their development process, and that's been very helpful, for writing unit tests and stuff like that. Second, we are working on a chatbot for spatial information, but it's going to require a lot more research and development. So we are pushing the envelope forward on that front. And third, we are also working on a way to basically OCR maps. And so, how do you take a PDF map and convert that into vector data without a human? And so we're working on tools to help facilitate that as well. But it's a long ways away before we actually come up with a product, because it requires research and development for those AI experiences. AI is nowhere near taking away the job of a map. You
Absolutely.
don't need, you don't when you start hearing about sighted people replacing their maps with chat bots, then I'll start getting worried.
uh, the theme of a lot of our episodes is the inclusivity and accessibility of gyms and fitness centers specifically. Do you
Yep.
have any thoughts or recommendations as to how gyms could be more accessible, not just in their map presentation, but just as a whole from your lived experience navigating gyms and fitness environments? Like what can gym owners and fitness professionals do more effectively to support people who are blind or low vision?
Yeah, this is a space I only have as a consumer. I've experienced as a consumer, so I haven't really, done a lot outside of that space. So personally, it's again like the layout. I guess if you had an audio map of your facility, that would be really nice. To kind of tell what people where the workout equipment is, because if you're blind, you have to like have somebody go through and walk you through the space and learn that space and memorize it that first time, or you have somebody go and take you to the different workout machines that are there. So if you had a map of the space that they could view, that would be awesome, and help blind people or disabled people understand where the workout equipment is without needing to go look at it while they're physically there. That's one. Two is like the workout machines are often inaccessible by default. So and I have not done a lot of research in this space for how to make workout equipment accessible. I'm sure there are some treadmills and ellipticals and all that kind of stuff that are accessible. But if you want to just kind of do the minimum accessibility, just make sure there's switches on them, because for some reason people think that touch screens are better than switches, and they're not for most people.
Yeah,
So just make sure there's some way to adjust and turn on and off the equipment without needing to use that touch screen. So our school, for example, switched over to using touch screen based on and off switches for the treadmills, and I can't use them independently now because I need somebody to go in and touch those touch screens. So get less touch screen the better. Use those touch screens for the silly stuff like the workout leader, or the taking you through Paris or whatever. And make sure they have tangible buttons for everything else. That's a big thing.
absolutely. Well, for people that are interested in learning more about Audiom or XR navigation as a whole, we'll include a link in the show notes, and I'll include your LinkedIn profile as well if people want to connect and ask you questions about what Audiom can provide for them. But Brandon, it was really interesting to hear about what you're building. It's really exciting. Hope I can find a way to support it or be a customer in with our 5K work, and even with our gym spaces as we work with more gyms and help them become more accessible. I think Audiom can definitely play a role in that.
Awesome. Yeah, we just need more people asking and interested in inclusive digital maps, whether you can afford it or not. If you're thinking about it and asking bigger, places that you're working with to make their maps accessible, that's going to just help a ton. So you don't even need to be disabled to be asking for an accessible version of their map. You can use the Axe plugin and show them a result and be like, "Hey, it's not passing these guidelines." XR navigation can help you make it fully compliant and accessible for everyone. So
Awesome.
anybody can be an advocate.
So, thank you for listening to the AdaptX podcast. Our effort to amplify the ideas of our guests and create more inclusive and accessible industries is futile unless these episodes reach a larger audience. If you enjoyed our discussion today, please leave us a rating or a review on whichever platform you use. And if you would like to learn more about AdaptX, the course that we teach to health and fitness professionals and the projects that our organization is working on, you can subscribe to our newsletter through our website, www.adaptx.org. Until next Monday.